were you born?
1924.
And where did you go to school?
Well, it's Hall Avenue, and there was a school, well, it isn't there anymore. I can't even remember the name of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up and went to Fairmount Avenue, and then I went up to Lincoln.
Okay.
And then a high school, and that was it.
So you're at Jamestown High School, and what year did you graduate from there?
Yeah.
Do you remember December 7th, 1941?
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Well, we were on our way to Erie, and they came over the radio. So I learned about it then.
And you hear it on the radio, and do you remember the reaction of your family?
Well, we were all surprised and really mad, and that's about it.
At some point, you get a letter from Uncle Sam saying greetings.
Yep. And I waited for I tried to get in the Navy, and I had bad eyes, so they wouldn't let me in the Navy. So I got in a Merchant Marine, and the draft board said they wouldn't release me. So the Merchant Marine was out. So I ended up waiting for him to be drafted. And as we were going through the line, they had a Y on it. And they said, if you want to join the Navy Seabees, you can do it. Well, I didn't want to stay in the Army, so I went into the Seabees. That was a good thing I did, too. Well, Seabees were the ones that done the construction.
Right.
And they would build the airfields and the ammunition dumps and like that.
Were any of your classmates being taken away, or did they leave early before you did?
Yeah, they did. One of them was killed on there.
Mm-hmm.
And that got a little action, and people were really worried when that happened. Mad about the Japs, and that's when they put them in detention camps.
Right.
And that was a hard part of their life.
Your training and served as a courier, dispatch person at Camp Perry.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
I couldn't think.
Camp Perry in Williamsburg, Virginia.
Yeah. Life.
Right.
And I fooled around with motorcycles a lot. So when I got into the Navy, I went into what they called ship's company as a dispatch rider. And that was motorcycles and sidecars and service cars and jeeps. When I would pick up other people that came into the Navy, they would come into, there's a railroad station there. They didn't keep track of me too much.
Were there any humorous things that happened? Any funny things, Jim, where you'd say, Greg, you're not going to believe this?
Well, when I picked up the guys in Perrysburg there, if they had a duffel bag, I'd put them in a sidecar and would go down and pretend it was a motorcycle or a machine gun. They were pretty good. Oh, we went to Providence, Rhode Island, and then we shipped back down to Norfolk and went over and we ended up in Pearl Harbor. I was finishing my boot training, you'd say, I finished that in Pearl Harbor.
Right.
And we went up into the hills, and I had about 2 weeks training there. And that was a lot of fun there.
What were you being trained for?
Well, I was being trained for mess cook. Everyone trained for mess cooking. And then as you developed mess cooking, you would try to get one of the officers to, or chiefs to want you so that you would get out of mess cooking. But it was a good job because you were always clean, or these guys that came in were all muddy and messed up and dirty. And you were nice and white outfits. So that worked out good. I went into, that's where I went into heavy equipment.
Okay.
Trucks and shovels, power shovels, and those.
Your next assignment is where?
Guam.
Guam?
I spent a few years there, I think it was.
Was there still activity going on at that point?
Well, they had killed a few Japs because they were just hiding out from the people.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just trying to survive. So the ones that we got there were stealing food and stuff like that at night. So I didn't see any action.
So you're on Guam. Were you You were doing construction?
Yeah,
What was it? Was it airfields or what were you working on?
yeah. Airfield, ammunition dumps,
Mm-hmm.
and they were a place where they stored ammunition, and they were deep into the hills.
You were there from, like, I'm reading the article again, September 1944 to July 1945. Is that right? About a year.
Yeah,
And the construction projects included Guam's Apra Harbor.
yeah.
And what was that? What'd you do there?
Well, you would dig the ditches out for barricades so that our ships could come in. Not barricades, piers and like that.
Right.
And I done that in Guam. And then we went to Okinawa, and I did it there a while, and went into ship's company or truck driving like that. And that was about it.
Right.
Ernie Pyle was killed then. He was a famous newspaper.
Right. There.
Well, he died on an island, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure.
Right.
But one of those things that happened, you hate to see him. He was a good writer.
Right. Franklin Roosevelt died in early 1945. So you would have been probably at Guam at the time. And do you remember the feeling among the servicemen? There's your president, it's the only one you ever knew. He dies.
Well, you were sad about it and mad at the Japs. You blamed it on them.
So also during that time period, while in the Pacific island of Guam, the Americans had declared victory. The Allies declared victory in Europe, and VE Day. Did you get? How did you get word of that? That on the other side of the Atlantic.
Well, we had got our. It was like a bombing, or one night why they came over when planes came over and they lit the sky up, and you thought you were going to get bombed, and here it was our folks that
Really?
was just lighting up the sky.
Celebrating.
Well, I don't know if it was. Well, I guess you'd say it was celebrating.
So at Guam, did you have any interaction with the natives at all? Was there anything like that?
Well, I went into one of the villages, which we weren't supposed to, and went into the family. You were really really all outspoken, because you'd walk into the city and walk into the houses, and that's why you weren't supposed to be there. And I had a little girl come up and she wanted me to take his picture. So I took her picture, but then she wanted to see it. Well, it was an old-fashioned camera, and I had fixed a place in my or mask to store it, because we couldn't have any cameras on this island. It was a Navy. And I couldn't show it to her, and she was mad at me for not showing it. But they were old, real old time people that were just existing, you might say.
Mm-hmm. How did they receive you? I mean, here you were Americans on
Well, we were lucky. I got in there, like in that village. Why, no one bothered you. You just could wander right any place you wanted. That's why they had made it so that it was outlawed that you wouldn't be in there. But we would hitchhike in on, we tried to get an Air Force captain or Air Force person because they would always stop.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend that was in a C-47, and that wasn't for any kind of bombing or anything like that. So I would travel all over the different islands in that plane. Well, Okinawa, they armed all our equipment with heavy armor plate, like we were going to invade someplace. So we were worried about that, and darn glad to see that we weren't going to be. And we built pier on there on Okinawa, so they could land the airplane or the boats, and that's about all we did there.
Were you fearful at all? I mean, when you're there, not knowing what's going to happen?
Well, there's one time in Okinawa, we were up in right in the center of it, or in the middle of Okinawa, and we built a big pier at the bottom, and we built a road up to the top of it. And Japs weren't so dumb, because they built in the bottom rather than the top, because if any hurricanes or that, they would be down in the bottom. And the stupid Americans would be up on top, and the things would blow away.
I've had a chance to talk to a few other Seabees, and one of the things they were also engaged in creating storage units and places where the food and the munitions would come in. And often there was a lot of activity around the food, the beer, getting access to it, all of that stuff. Did you ever see any of that going on?
Well, I hate to say it, but we always got a little bit of whatever they were like when we was working in a shipping yard, or where they delivered the stuff. If there's any good stuff, we always had a little bit of a few cases that were broken he went into, and he got that way.
Just happened to be broken.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. So what was the beer of choice? I'm just trying to visualize. There you are in an island in the Pacific. What'd you have?
Well, the beer was 6.1. It was half the price, or half the capacity, I guess you call it, of the regular.
Yeah.
But we always got a lot of it if we were going, like when we transferred from one island to another. You always got good food and a little beer as you were standing, which you swapped for other people, cigarettes and like that.
So talk about the black market. I mean, you all were assigned cigarettes and chocolate bars and stuff like that. Was there a lot of that stuff going on?
Well, we got a lot of cigarettes. We got more cigarettes than we got anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And you could barter that. You'd barter so many beers, or you got beer and then you'd swap them for the cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
But the beer was always low. Oh, it was whatever the capacity or whatever the pressure was. Why, it was always low pressure. So it took more of them to get high.
So what did you do on your spare time?
Spare time, you usually washed. We had laundry, and after we got going, we built up a laundry service, and that was usually the officers' dance hall when it wasn't used as laundry.
Were you ever invited to the officers' dance hall?
No way.
No way?
You weren't allowed to go in them.
So there was a caste system. I mean, there was the officers, and then there were...
Yes, I'd say there was,
yeah.
in the Seabees anyhow. We built a sick bay, or a office, or a place where they brought in the wounded,
Right?
and we would always service the Seabee outfit, and then they would have the wounded line up after. So they got they got good food too.
What were the tougher parts of your job? I mean, what were the kind of ones where you really had to be good at?
Well, being a crane operator or bulldozer, why, you learned the hard part of construction there.
Had Guam been pretty well cleaned out by the time you got there, and Okinawa likewise?
Guam developed into a real nice place. They had, that was an American one.
Okay.
And that was made with the Americans. They got in there before.
It said, you survived the devastating Typhoon Louise on October 9th, 1945. Tell me about that.
Oh, that might be when the typhoon came through and cleaned our camp all out.
Really?
So we survived, and we had plywood that we salvaged, and we made floors and then made sides up the side of them, so
Right.
that you had sheds almost like that you lived in for a while.
What was the experience like? I mean, we're talking major league wind and rain, and was that probably one of your more fearful days?
Yeah, you worked you worked when in the rain. You'd have your shovel or your power crane, and that's when they all used cables. And your bulldozers that were over the top instead of down in the bottom of them. And they had to be greased. The bearings and stuff had to be greased. So the poor old apprentice, he would start out learning by going up and greasing all these poles. And
Oh my gosh.
so you learn to have the guys take care of them that way.
So when you are in Okinawa, you get word that Japanese surrender. VJ Day. What was that like?
Well, that was another big, hilarious sailing of weapons and stuff in the air.
Did you feel like you might be going home?
Oh yeah, we had so many points you had to give to get yourself, and then you could go home.
Right.
And my outfit that I originated up in the 4th Battalion, they went home first because they had been from the Aleutians. They had been the first outfit out and the first one in, and the first one back out again. And when we were in Pearl Harbor, you noticed all these pineapple places that they grew pineapples. They've been converted into storage places for the camps and that by replacing the pineapples. We got into Pearl Harbor. They had a place where we piled all the aluminum, and I got my first canteen, or a second one. The first one was made out of yellow plastic.
Mm-hmm.
That tasted just like the plastic. And so I gladly swapped it for a steel one, which I didn't use. But the biggest thing on coming back into the States was all the lights. Colored lights, and come into the harbor, and the harbor would be all this lit up. Wouldn't be any blackouts or anything like that.
Now, when you came the harbor, you talk about the harbor coming into the United States. Did you go into New York City or did you go to Providence?
We came to San Pedro, California.
Okay.
And we came out in there. Oh, I got mustered out. I was up in Rhode Island, Providence.
Okay.
And got mustered out 3 days. I stayed there for I had friends up there, and I wanted to see an Italian wedding. They said that they were really good, and it was 3 days late. I was mustered out, and the papers would tell who was coming home. And my folks wondered where I was because I was mustered out 3 days earlier. So that was a little experience.
So you stayed. You decided to stay, go to an Italian wedding just because you wanted to see it.
Yeah, a friend of mine was an Italian, so he told me I should stay there.
Was it worth it?
Sure was.
So I'm just thinking about your mom and dad, who haven't seen you in a long time. They read in the newspapers or that you can come home.
Yeah.
And you don't come home.
Well, that was the part that they didn't like, is that I was discharged 3 days earlier, and I still was out in New Rochelle.
Curious, when you get back home, your mom and dad and family kind of say, welcome back, and they're asking you about what your experience was like in the service and in the Pacific. What did you tell them?
Well, my brother was out earlier, so he got, when we got into Buffalo train station, I spent 3 hours, and all I could see is this soldier, my brother, with a great big bandage on his head, so I knew he couldn't be my brother. And we walked around about 3 hours, and he finally came up and asked me if I was Jim Currie, and we got going. That was a winter, I think. I think there was snow on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And we came home. Oh, that was the reason he had smashed my dad's car up. They couldn't get a hood for it, so they had to piece two of them together. Parts were still hard to get.
So was that your brother that met you at the train then?
Yeah, in Buffalo.
Yeah. And did he have the bandage on?
Yeah. He had smashed my dad's car before we got home. So we couldn't use it.
So the bandage had nothing to do with service. It was.
No,
How do you reflect on your time at the service, Jim? I mean, what's your feelings towards that?
well, it's a good thing I was in there, probably. Probably been killed on a motorcycle here if I hadn't been. No, it was a learning experience. I got to do all kinds of construction and use a heavy equipment, which didn't do me a bit of good now. I went into tool and die making.
But you would do it again?
Oh, I'd have to.
And were you glad you went into the Seabees and didn't end up in the Army?
Yeah, oh, sure.
I'm looking at the program here and it says Little Short Runner presents the 4th U.S. Naval Construction Battalion, Penguin. So that was your unit.
Yeah, fourth. But anyone that joined the construction outfit after they shipped out, the first time was called a short runner. So you see in that book there's a lot of cartoons. We had a good cartoonist, and he used to give a lot of cartoons. I don't know whatever happened to him. Yeah, you seen the guys making big culverts out of 5-gallon or 50-gallon drums and welding them together and cutting them up.
Well, I salute you.